Let's begin with this: you are enough. Not because you've achieved everything you set out to or because you're flawless. Not because you always have the right answers or you never stumble. You're enough because you are here, you are growing, and you're willing to be seen just as you are. Self-worth is not something we earn by ticking off achievements or accumulating approval. It's something far more foundational, something that exists in us simply by virtue of being human. So many of us believe that if we could only reach that next goal, be that much stronger, smarter, or better, then we'd feel worthy, then we'd feel worthy, then we'd be enough. But this line of thinking sets us up for an endless chase. No matter how much we accomplish, that feeling of enough always seems just out of reach. The truth is, worth isn't found in accomplishments, nor is it perfected in us by reaching some ideal. Worthiness is about embracing who we are right now, even as we grow, even as we continue to make mistakes, even as we fall short of our own expectations. It's about letting go of the idea that only the best version of ourselves deserves love, happiness, or acceptance. We spend so much of our lives trying to polish and perfect who we are for the world, thinking that if we're just right, we'll finally deserve to take up space. But perfection isn't the price of entry into being worthy. Worthiness is our birthright. When we start to accept our worth as something intrinsic, we stop seeking external validation to prove ourselves. It allows us to breathe, to ease up on the constant need to perform, impress, or compete. Imagine how different life could be if instead of striving for some unreachable ideal, we spent our energy recognizing and honoring our inherent value. When we allow ourselves to be fully human, allowing for flaws, embracing growth, and accepting ourselves as we are, we stop hiding from life. Self-worth over perfection doesn't mean we abandon our aspirations or stop trying to improve. It means our growth comes from a place of love and curiosity, not fear of inadequacy. We begin to understand that self-worth isn't conditional, that it doesn't depend on whether or not we measure up. By choosing self-worth over perfection, we give ourselves permission to be human, to learn, to make mistakes, and to grow. And through that, we create a foundation of true confidence, a quiet, unwavering belief that we are enough as we are. In that space, we stop trying to fit someone else's mold, stop exhausting ourselves with people pleasing or pretending to have it all together. Instead, we're free to show up authentically without the burden of trying to be something we're not. Self-worth allows us to be present with ourselves and with others, to connect more deeply because we're not hiding behind a mask of perfection. It's in our humanness, in our willingness to be seen as we are, that we discover true connection and peace. Choosing self-worth over perfection is choosing to be real. And in that choice, we find a kind of freedom that perfection could never offer. Vulnerability has often been seen as a weakness, a sign that we're open to harm or that we don't have it all together. But real strength doesn't come from wearing a mask, it comes from being able to take it off. Vulnerability isn't about oversharing or exposing every part of ourselves to everyone, it's about being willing to be seen. To show up in the world as our true selves without the safety of pretending. It's acknowledging the parts of ourselves that we might find messy, uncomfortable, or unfinished, and choosing to show up anyway. In allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, we're actually embracing a deeper form of courage. It takes courage to say, here I am, flaws and all, ready to be seen. Vulnerability means stepping into uncertainty, allowing ourselves to say, I don't have all the answers, or I feel scared. Or I need help. These moments make us feel exposed, but they're also the moments that let us connect most deeply with others. When we're open, people get to see the real us, the parts of us that are trying, that are scared, that are growing. And in seeing those parts, they can truly connect with us, not with some idealized version of who we think we should be. The power of vulnerability lies in its ability to create space for authentic relationships. When we're vulnerable, we're giving others permission to be vulnerable too. We're saying it's okay to be human. And in that, we find a profound sense of belonging and connection because we realize we're not alone. We're no longer performing or striving to be something we're not. Instead, we're fully present, open, and engaged in a way that invites true, meaningful relationships. Vulnerability lets us experience the richness of connection because it's rooted in honesty and authenticity, not in perfection or self-protection. Allowing ourselves to be vulnerable also opens us up to growth. Vulnerability means we're willing to risk failure, to step into the unknown, to take a chance on something that matters. It means we're choosing to value our dreams, relationships, and goals enough to risk being hurt or disappointed. When we embrace vulnerability, we're saying that we value what's on the other side of our fear more than we value staying comfortable or safe. This willingness to be vulnerable, to show up, to try to put ourselves out there is what pushes us to grow, to stretch, and to become more resilient. Vulnerability is powerful because it gives us a sense of freedom. When we stop hiding behind walls of control or perfection, we're free to experience life as it truly is. We let go of the need to be someone else's definition of enough, and instead, we step fully into our own truth. This doesn't mean we won't still feel afraid or that we'll never feel exposed again. But it does mean that we're not letting fear control our lives. We're choosing to live boldly, fully aware that there will be times we stumble or get hurt, but knowing that we have the strength to rise again. In embracing vulnerability, we discover a strength we didn't know we had, a strength that comes from being real, from being open, and from letting ourselves be seen in all our beautiful, imperfect humanity. This is the power of vulnerability. It frees us to be true, to be brave, and to live a life that's fully, authentically ours. Letting go of shame is a journey that many of us don't even know we need to take. Shame is that persistent, often quiet voice that tells us we're not enough. It's deeply personal. And it creeps in when we start to question our worth, doubting if we are lovable, capable, or worthy of joy. Shame convinces us that there's something inherently wrong with us, something that, if people knew, would lead them to reject or abandon us. It isn't about what we've done, but about who we believe we are. It's this feeling that we are somehow less, somehow undeserving, and it can have a profound impact on our lives, our choices, and our sense of self. What's most damaging about shame is its silence. Shame tells us to hide, to withdraw, to pretend, and to isolate ourselves because we believe that if anyone saw our true selves, they'd turn away. It wants us to keep our heads down, to not take risks, to not speak up or stand out. Shame thrives in secrecy and silence because it makes us feel we're alone in our struggle. But we aren't alone. Every one of us has known shame in one way or another. The truth is, shame is a universal experience, yet it convinces each of us that we're isolated, that we're somehow uniquely flawed. Letting go of shame requires that we first recognize its voice. It requires that we pause and identify when that critical, undermining voice speaks up. Recognizing shame allows us to challenge it, to bring it into the light, and to refuse to let it have the final word on who we are. When we name our shame, when we put it into words or share it with someone we trust, it begins to lose its power. In that act of sharing, we start to realize that what we're feeling doesn't make us unworthy, it makes us human. We also find out that shame doesn't hold up well in the light of compassion. When we allow others to see us, flaws and all, we begin to realize that our worth isn't dependent on perfection, and that we can be loved and accepted as we are. Letting go of shame also means releasing the need to meet unrealistic expectations. Shame often comes from feeling that we must meet certain standards, whether they're imposed by society, family, or even ourselves. When we fall short, shame tells us we're a failure, that our mistakes define us. But when we let go of these unrealistic expectations, we allow ourselves to show up fully, imperfections and all. We learn to see our mistakes not as marks against us, but as opportunities to learn and grow. Releasing shame means understanding that our missteps don't make us unworthy, they make us human. Self-compassion is another key to letting go of shame. When we practice kindness toward ourselves, we counteract the harsh inner voice of shame. Self-compassion reminds us that we are deserving of understanding, forgiveness, and love, especially when we fall short. It's choosing to speak to ourselves with the same tenderness and support that we would offer a close friend. Through self-compassion, we remind ourselves that we're worthy not despite our imperfections, but because of our humanity. Letting go of shame is not a one-time event, it's a process. It requires that we repeatedly challenge the voice that tells us we're not enough, and that we replace it with a narrative of worth and acceptance. It involves surrounding ourselves with people who can support us, who remind us of our value, and who help us see ourselves through a lens of love and kindness. As we do this work, we build resilience against shame. We start to trust in our own inherent worth and live with the freedom to be exactly who we are without apology. Ultimately, letting go of shame is an act of reclaiming our power. It's taking back the right to define who we are and what we deserve. When we choose to let go of shame, we give ourselves permission to be authentic, to show up fully, and to live with a sense of joy and purpose. We stop hiding, we stop shrinking, we become the fullest, most vibrant versions of ourselves, grounded in the knowledge that we are enough. Setting boundaries and honoring our needs is one of the most important acts of self-respect we can practice, yet it is often one of the hardest. In a world that constantly demands more from us, more time, more energy, more of our attention, it can be easy to feel like we must give endlessly to please others or meet their expectations, even when doing so compromises our own well-being. We're often taught to put others first, to sacrifice our own needs for the sake of others' happiness or success. But this mindset leads us down a path of burnout, resentment, and ultimately a loss of self. Boundaries are not about being rigid or cold. They are about understanding where our limits lie and communicating those limits in a way that honors our own needs without guilt. They are about recognizing that we deserve to take up space to protect our time, our energy, and our emotional health. Boundaries are an act of self-care, not selfishness. They are a way to ensure that we have enough to give, not just to others, but also to ourselves. When we honor our own needs, we show up in the world as our best selves, capable of offering more meaningful connections, work, and love, because we are coming from a place of fullness, not depletion. The challenge in setting boundaries often comes from the fear of disappointing others or being labeled as selfish or uncaring. We worry that if we say no, we'll be rejected, abandoned, or judged. But the truth is, when we fail to set boundaries, we are actually rejecting ourselves. We are telling ourselves that our needs don't matter, that our comfort isn't important, and that we are responsible for everyone else's happiness except our own. In reality, setting a boundary is one of the most loving things we can do, not only for ourselves, but for others as well. It shows that we value ourselves enough to protect our own well-being, and it sets a clear expectation of how we want to be treated. When we set boundaries, we also make space for honesty. We give ourselves the opportunity to communicate what we need in a clear and respectful way. It may feel uncomfortable at first, especially if we are not used to advocating for ourselves, but each time we set a boundary, we reinforce our right to have our needs met. We also create healthier relationships by showing others how we wish to be treated. Setting boundaries does not mean that we are rejecting people or being cold-hearted. It means that we are being honest about what we can and cannot give. It's about creating mutual respect, where both parties understand and acknowledge each other's needs. One of the most profound benefits of setting boundaries is the space it creates for self-reflection. When we take the time to honor our own needs, we also learn more about ourselves, about what nourishes us, what drains us, and what brings us joy. We become more attuned to our inner world, more able to listen to our own voices and desires. As we grow in self-awareness, we become more skilled at setting boundaries that are aligned with our values, desires, and long-term goals. We stop operating on autopilot, driven by external demands or internalized expectations, and instead begin to live with intention, honoring ourselves as we would honor a cherished friend. Honoring our needs doesn't always mean saying no to others. Sometimes it means saying yes to ourselves. It means giving ourselves permission to rest, to say no to things that don't serve us, and to make choices that prioritize our well-being. It means not feeling guilty for taking time to recharge, for stepping back, or for seeking out what truly fulfills us. It means knowing that we are deserving of love, attention, and care, and that we are worth the effort it takes to prioritize our own health and happiness. Setting boundaries and honoring our needs is not a one-time decision, it's an ongoing practice. It requires mindfulness and self-awareness, an ability to recognize when we're starting to feel overwhelmed or depleted, and the courage to take action. The more we practice setting boundaries, the more natural it becomes. We start to recognize the signs of burnout and stress before they overtake us, and we learn how to take a step back before we give too much. We become more attuned to our own needs and more comfortable with expressing them. Ultimately, setting boundaries is about creating a life that aligns with who we are and what we value. It's about choosing ourselves in a world that often wants to pull us in a million different directions. When we set and honor our boundaries, we stop living reactively to others' demands and start living intentionally, grounded in the knowledge that our needs matter. By practicing this, we create space for our own peace, joy, and authenticity, and we become better able to show up for others in a way that is generous, loving, and whole. Building resilience through connection is one of the most powerful ways to navigate life's challenges. Resilience is often seen as an individual trait, something we either have or don't have, but in truth, it's a communal process. We are not meant to endure hardship alone. The strength to bounce back, to adapt, and to thrive in the face of adversity is often built through the support and presence of others. When we open ourselves to connection, when we allow ourselves to lean on others and allow others to lean on us, we strengthen our resilience in ways that would be impossible on our own. Connection provides us with the emotional resources we need to cope with life's difficulties. When we're in the midst of a struggle, whether it's personal, professional, or emotional, our tendency can be to isolate ourselves, to retreat inward, and to carry the weight of the world alone. But this isolation only deepens our sense of vulnerability and helplessness. The truth is, when we're connected to others, we have access to a broader perspective. We realize that we're not alone in our experiences. Others have walked similar paths, faced similar fears, and navigated through similar obstacles. Sharing our struggles and hearing others' stories reminds us that we can make it through, that there's hope, and that our pain doesn't have to define us. In connection, we find validation, understanding, and a sense of solidarity that gives us the strength to keep going. Resilience through connection also involves mutuality. It's not just about receiving support from others, it's about giving back as well. Being there for others when they need us not only strengthens our relationships, but also reinforces our sense of purpose and belonging. There's something deeply empowering about knowing that we can offer our strength to someone else in their time of need. It reminds us that we are part of something bigger, that our lives are interconnected, and that our struggles, while deeply personal, are part of a shared human experience. The act of supporting others reinforces our own resilience because it helps us see that we have something valuable to contribute, that our presence in others' lives is meaningful. Building resilience through connection doesn't just mean sharing our problems, it means building a network of people who offer us love, encouragement, and support when we need it most. These people, whether they're close friends, family members, or mentors, serve as anchors during turbulent times. They provide a safe space where we can be vulnerable without fear of judgment. When we share our pain or our struggles with someone we trust, we release some of the burden. Just by being present with us, by listening without trying to fix, these individuals help us to process and make sense of our emotions. And sometimes that's all we need, someone to simply be there, acknowledging our experience without the pressure to do anything more. Moreover, connection fosters empathy, which in turn builds resilience. When we engage deeply with others, we are invited to step into their shoes and see the world from their perspective. This not only strengthens our capacity for compassion, but also helps us to view our own challenges with greater clarity and understanding. We learn that our struggles are not as insurmountable as they seem when we are able to reflect on the resilience we see in others. The stories we hear, the support we receive, and the wisdom shared with us become tools that help us build our own strength. Through connection, we learn that resilience isn't about toughness or an ability to withstand everything in isolation. It's about adaptability and knowing when to ask for help, when to lean into the support of others, and when to share our own strength. Practicing self-compassion daily is one of the most transformative habits we can develop. Yet it's also one of the most challenging. We live in a world that often promotes achievement over self-acceptance, perfection over progress, and external validation over inner peace. We're conditioned to be our harshest critics, constantly measuring ourselves against impossible standards. We push ourselves to do more, be more, and have more, but at what cost? The truth is, when we are constantly striving for perfection and ignoring our own needs for care and kindness, we burn out, lose sight of our worth, and begin to doubt our ability to navigate the difficulties of life. Self-compassion is the antidote to this cycle. It is the practice of treating ourselves with the same kindness, care, and understanding that we would offer to a close friend in times of struggle. To practice self-compassion is to understand that we are human, with all the beauty and imperfections that come with it. It's a recognition that we don't have to be flawless to deserve love or acceptance. When we experience failure, disappointment, or pain, our natural instinct is often to judge ourselves harshly, to believe that we somehow deserve the discomfort, or that we're not enough because we've fallen short. But self-compassion invites us to step out of judgment and into understanding. Instead of criticizing ourselves for not meeting some standard, we offer ourselves a gentle acknowledgement of our feelings. We remind ourselves that it's okay to struggle, that it's okay to be imperfect, and that we are worthy of care even in our brokenness. This practice starts with self-awareness, the ability to recognize when we are being overly critical or dismissive of ourselves. In those moments, we can pause, breathe, and check in with how we are speaking to ourselves. Are we offering words of encouragement or harsh criticism? Are we demanding perfection from ourselves or embracing the reality that growth takes time and patience? Self-compassion involves not only noticing when we are being too hard on ourselves, but actively choosing to replace that judgment with gentleness. It means acknowledging our pain without turning it into a personal flaw. Instead of saying, I'm a failure, we can say, I'm struggling right now, and that's okay. I'm doing the best I can. Part of self-compassion is also recognizing that we are deserving of love, care, and understanding simply because we exist. So often we tie our worth to our actions or achievements, believing that we must earn the right to feel good about ourselves. But self-compassion teaches us that our worth is inherent, that we don't need to prove anything to deserve kindness. It's the simple act of showing up for ourselves, even when we've made mistakes or feel unworthy. It's about accepting ourselves as we are, in both our strengths and our weaknesses, and understanding that no part of us is unworthy of care. Self-compassion also involves giving ourselves permission to rest and recharge. In a world that values productivity, we often feel guilty for taking time for ourselves. But we cannot pour from an empty cup. When we neglect our own needs, we risk burnout, resentment, and emotional depletion. Practicing self-compassion means prioritizing our well-being, even when it feels uncomfortable. It means recognizing that we need time to recover, to reflect, and to reconnect with ourselves in order to show up fully for others and for the world. It's the understanding that self-care is not indulgent but necessary, and that resting is a vital part of living a balanced, healthy life. Daily self-compassion is also about forgiveness. It's about understanding that mistakes are part of the human experience, and they do not define us. When we mess up or fall short of our expectations, self-compassion encourages us to be kind and forgiving toward ourselves, just as we would be to a loved one who is struggling. Instead of clinging to guilt or shame, we let go of the belief that we are broken or unworthy because of our imperfections. Forgiveness isn't about excusing our mistakes, it's about accepting them as part of our journey and using them as opportunities to learn and grow. Incorporating self-compassion into our daily lives doesn't mean that we stop striving for improvement or growth. It simply means that we approach ourselves with patience and grace along the way. It means we acknowledge our progress without measuring it against some ideal of perfection. We celebrate the small wins and treat ourselves with the same kindness we would offer a friend who is working through their own struggles. We recognize that we are enough right here, right now, regardless of where we are on our journey. The beauty of practicing self-compassion daily is that it slowly transforms the way we relate to ourselves and the world. When we treat ourselves with kindness, we begin to see life through a different lens. We no longer measure our worth by how well we perform or how much we achieve. Instead, we start to understand that we are worthy of love, respect, and care simply because we are human. This practice becomes the foundation of a more peaceful, fulfilling life, one where we are not constantly striving for approval or perfection, but instead learning to rest in the truth that we are enough just as we are. Through self-compassion, we find the strength to face each day with more confidence, grace, and resilience. Practicing self-compassion daily is a transformative habit that involves treating ourselves with kindness, care, and understanding, especially in times of struggle. It means recognizing that we don't have to be perfect to deserve love and acceptance. Instead of harshly judging ourselves, we acknowledge our human flaws with gentleness and forgiveness, offering ourselves the same support we would offer a close friend. Self-compassion also requires giving ourselves permission to rest, recharge, and prioritize our well-being, knowing that we cannot give our best when depleted. It's about letting go of guilt and embracing the understanding that mistakes are opportunities for growth. Ultimately, self-compassion fosters a sense of worth and inner peace, allowing us to navigate life's challenges with grace and resilience, knowing that we are enough just as we are.